once again, I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining tonight. This is the writing and editing workshop for the Imagine Little Tokyo short story contest hosted by the Japanese American National Museum's Discover Nikkei project and the Little Tokyo Historical Society. So to kick us off and have us guide us through our evening tonight, I want to introduce Miya Iwataki. She is a longtime activist, a member of Nikkei Progressives, and the vice president of Little Tokyo Historical Society. And we are so lucky to have her guiding us through our evening tonight. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Miya. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. Always such a gracious host. So welcome everybody to the writing and editing workshop for Imagine Little Tokyo short story contest, featuring Oscar-nominated screenwriter Iris Yamashita and award-winning novelist Gary Phillips. So tonight, Little Tokyo Historical Society is celebrating the 10th anniversary of our Imagine Little Tokyo short story contest with our partner of 3 years, Discover Nikkei, which, as Joy said, is a project of JA National Museum. So 10 years ago, in 2013, the Little Tokyo Historical Society imagined having a contest to promote interest in Little Tokyo and seeking writers to create stories about Little Tokyo. And what better way to raise awareness and celebrate its specialness than to celebrate its history and legacy through storytelling? We welcome tales of fiction set in the past, present, or future Little Tokyo. Stories that demonstrate knowledge and appreciation for Little Tokyo and capture its spirit and cultural essence. Today, we receive stories from across America, the West Coast from Baton Rouge to New York City, and internationally from Japan, Canada, India, and Europe, and even those in the military service. So these writers reflect the diversity of America from a wide variety of people and a range of ages. Our youngest writer in the youth category was 11 years old, and he won. Their stories made us laugh, moved us to tears, stretched the imagination, and made us nostalgic for Little Tokyo in its former incarnations. The lucky and talented winners of each category, adult, youth, and Japanese, will this year receive a $1,000 cash prize. Pretty good for an all-volunteer committee. This contest, and I just want to say thank you all for being here. And I noticed we have participants from British Columbia, Virginia, New York City, North Carolina, the Bay Area, and we have our own member, Jeffrey Chin from Tokyo. So welcome everybody. And I'm so glad, we have such a broad audience. So this contest began as a seed of an idea by Bill Watanabe. Bill's a founding member of the Little Tokyo Historical Society, and the founding executive director at Little Tokyo Service Center. Bill also dreamed of a gym that has now become the Budokan today. So Bill Watanabe is the go-to person for all things Little Tokyo. And to put us in the right mood, he'll talk a little bit about what makes Little Tokyo special. Bill?
Thank you, Miya. And thank you for everyone who is joining this seminar. We have some terrific speakers who will be sharing their knowledge and skills with you. So we hope it'll be very constructive for you. Little Tokyo is a special place. I've been working in Little Tokyo now for almost 40 years. And for some of you who may not be as familiar, we have lots of places that are interesting and could be great backdrops or part of the story that you might be thinking about. We have landmarks here in Little Tokyo. There's about a 5-story fire tower, which would be a great meeting place. I can just imagine 2 people perhaps on a date meeting at the fire tower. There's a Japanese garden, a beautiful prize-winning Japanese garden here in Little Tokyo. We have the Onizuka marker for the astronaut who perished in the space shuttle. There's the Noguchi Plaza, designed by a very worldwide famous artist, Isamu Noguchi. We have a mural that depicts Little Tokyo. There's a Go for Broke memorial for those who fought during World War II. There are buildings here in Little Tokyo that have tremendous potential for stories. The old Union Church and the old Nishi Honganji Buddhist Temple, they're both 100 years old. They have many connections to not only Little Tokyo's history, but there are like ghosts that people have actually heard or seen there in the building. The Japanese American Cultural Center, the Japanese American National Museum. All of these are very colorful, iconic, distinct buildings. The Japanese Village Plaza with its kind of a meandering walkway where people can shop or eat in the restaurants. The Little Tokyo Tower, senior housing, it's about a 20-story building. We have a path, let's just call the spine of Little Tokyo, that leads from the museum all the way down to the gymnasium, the Budokan, and it just kind of wanders through Little Tokyo, and that's the spine. And we also have unique spots such as the jungle, which is probably the largest anime retail store in the United States. Fugetsudo is an example of over 100 and I think this year it's 120 years old confectionery shop that has been in Little Tokyo for all that time as a family business. We have stores like Hello Kitty, which may not be unique, but plays an important part in Little Tokyo. So those are just a few of the spots. I should also mention that there is a statue dedicated to Ninomiya Kinjiro right at the corner of 2nd and San Pedro. And there's also another statue dedicated to Sugihara, the Japanese Schindler, right there in Little Tokyo as well. So those are just some of the places, and hopefully they might spark ideas or provide settings for your stories. And we'd love to hear how you weave in all these aspects of Little Tokyo into your story. So good luck to all of you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Bill. I also have to mention that Little Tokyo Historical Society, working closely with our member Jeffrey Chin, we put up a monument to Sei Fuji, who is a civil rights hero that none of us really knew about until we first heard his story through LTHS, and now there's a movie about him. There's a book that came out, and there's a whole other side of Little Tokyo that, what started from a guy jumping ship in 18, what was it? 18, I can't remember, Bill, was it 1868? Who started the first?
1884.
1884, who started the first restaurant. Little Tokyo has struggled through gentrification, world wars, being deserted, becoming Bronzeville, and there's just so much history and a history of struggle, and so much food for thought and for storytelling. So our submission deadline is midnight on January 31st. And I suspect that many of you are well into your stories. And so we'll talk about editing tonight, but don't worry if you're still at the beginning. You have the information from Bill, and we'll be also talking about story writing. And now we are so honored and fortunate to have as our featured speakers, Iris Yamashita and Gary Phillips. Iris Yamashita is the Academy Award nominated writer for the movie Letters from Iwo Jima, directed by Clint Eastwood. Letters received a Golden Globe Award for Best Foreign Language Film and was nominated for 4 Academy Awards, including Best Original Screenplay, which was Iris. She's also worked in Hollywood for 15 years, developing and consulting on material for both screenwriting and film. and streaming media. Iris has taught screenwriting at UCLA's Professional and Master of Fine Arts programs and at the AFI, American Film Institute. Her debut novel, City Under One Roof, the first in a mystery series, was just released on January 10th. Yes. And already she's received early acclaim and has been hailed as a major new talent by Publishers Weekly. And the book also received starred reviews from Kirkus Reviews, Publishers Weekly, and the Library Journal. So congratulations. Next, our speaker will be Gary Phillips, son of a mechanic and a librarian. He has published various novels, comics, and short stories, and has edited several anthologies, including Anthony-winning The Obama Inheritance, 15 stories of conspiracy noir, South Central noir. Gary has co-edited Witnesses for the Dead, stories inspired by the legacy of George Floyd. His book, Violent Spring, set in the aftermath of the LA uprising of 1992, first published nearly 30 years ago, was named in 2020 as one of the essential crime novels of Los Angeles. The Washington Post and Booklist named his most recent novel, One Shot Harry, as one of the best mysteries of 2022. He's also a co-producer on FX's Snowfalls, about crack and the CIA in 1980 South Central, where he grew up. Snowfall streams on Hulu. So welcome, Iris and Gary, and we'll begin with Iris.
Thank you so much, Miya. First, I'm going to apologize for anyone who was expecting to see Naomi Hirahara here instead of me. She has a very good reason for not being here. But I don't have much time, so I'm just going to jump right into it. I've been, as Miya said, I've been writing screenplays, and then I just got my foot into the door with novels. But I did start, my first published pieces were short stories. So for all you aspiring writers, this is a good place to start. You can use your short stories, try to get them published or try to win this contest. And that's, a calling card when you're looking for someone to represent you. And I think from Gary and myself, we do cross different types of writing. So I think the basic story elements are very similar. So what I've learned from screenwriting has been very helpful for me in writing prose. So I'm just going to share with you some tips that I have for editing. So this is not a how to start a story. It's more about along the lines of editing. Okay, so I always just like to start with questions. So does your story have a beginning, a middle, and an end? That's kind of, it's kind of a given, but that's what you want to have in every story, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I will get into that in detail as I go on. Are you taking your reader on a journey? So stories, usually you start somewhere and you end up somewhere else, not just physically, but emotionally. So try to keep that in mind. And then ask yourself, why are you telling this story? And what do you want the reader to get from reading it? Do you want them to learn something? Do you want them to feel something? Do you want them to question something? Like sometimes we writers don't have answers, but we'd like to raise questions. So, this is another way of saying, what's the theme of your story? So as I said, you always have a beginning. So what do you have in the beginning? Are you sure when you've written your short story in the beginning, have you established the time and the setting and the tone? Do you know where is your story being set? What's the time? Sometimes people go into the past but the reader doesn't know you're in the in the past. So, make sure you establish what it is. And sometimes I've read stories that I thought were comedies, and then they end up taking a right turn and they become a horror, So in a short story, you don't have so much time. So make sure you're establishing what it is. And then ask yourself, is it the best place to open your story? So for instance, just an example, say you have a character who wants to eat some delicious cake in Little Tokyo. And then we have him start, he works at a boring corporate job. And, he just wants to he has to come from Long Beach or something. Maybe we don't start with him at the corporate job. Like maybe he's already on his way to this shop where he wants to get this delicious cake. And so then maybe you even start, he's already at the store and he's pounding on the window. And, that's where you want to start. So you start from the middle and sometimes you go back. Or for instance, maybe you have a woman who wants to meet her mother, and she's going to start in the 70s. So we establish, she's starting in the 1970s. And then as an adult, she's trying to meet her mother who's sick. But, maybe we don't want to start in the 70s. Maybe she's already an adult, and then we go back in time. So just think of like, what's the most exciting place where you want to start? And in the beginning, is there a question that you want to have answered? So, how did I get here? Or maybe the question is, what's going to happen next? Maybe that's all it is. Or it could be like, will these characters fall in love? Will he get the girl? Or will this person find what they are looking for? In the cake story, will he eat the cake? It could just be something as simple as that. Will he be able to get this cake that he wants to eat so badly? For the woman who's meeting her mother, will the woman make it in time to see her mother before her mother dies? So, you have to have a question that pulls the reader in so that they can try to get an answer. And then questions to ask in the middle. Is there some kind of conflict? And, conflict can come from within the character or from interactions with other characters, or just some external forces, like maybe there's a hurricane. That's a conflict. So for instance, for the woman visiting her mother as an adult, you can add conflict by saying maybe they fought and they haven't talked to each other for years. So that's the conflict. With the guy who wants the cake, maybe he's had a really bad day and he's in a bad mood and he just needs to have this cake, but he's going to be late and the store is going to close before he gets there, so that's a conflict. And then can you raise the stakes? So the man who drove all the way from Long Beach, maybe there's only one cake left and he has to fend off the other customer who wants that cake. And if he doesn't get that cake, he's going to be like in an even fouler mood, so you just want to up it so that it feels like there's a stake. Or for the woman who wants to meet her mother before she dies, if they fought and they never resolved their conflict. So if she doesn't get to meet her mother in time, that conflict will go unresolved and, she'll feel miserable her whole life. So just, raise the stakes. Are your characters interesting and three-dimensional? Do we care? Do we, if this guy who wants the cake, he's always in a foul mood, we have to understand, why is he in a foul mood? So that we root for him so that he actually gets the cake. So, just think of your characters in three-dimensional ways. And then in the end, does it feel like we concluded that journey that we started when you began the short story? do we come to another place? Like, you know, the guy who gets the cake, he gets the cake, and then it brings back his memories of his childhood, and you know, it makes him whole again. For the girl who wants to meet her mother, you know, they resolve their conflict, and they find out the reason they've been fighting has been about over a mistake. So does it feel like we've gone on a journey and we've concluded? And do you answer the question, you know, it's did he get the cake? You know, did she meet the mother? So that's kind of obvious. And then what's the aftermath? So the aftermath is, like I said, once this guy is able to get his cake, he's no longer the angry man, and he's like, oh, I got the best cake in the world, and now my life is whole. Or for the woman who met her mother, now I've resolved the conflict with my mother, and now I won't have this emotional burden on me. So I don't think I have enough time. So I will just list these and just say really quickly, you know, make your sentences active, get rid of exposition, you know, make it feel like you're in the middle of the action, get rid of all the small talk like hello and goodbye. Whenever I go through my editing process, I look for these kind of words like hello and goodbye, and then I just toss them and think, how can I make this more exciting? So that's another thing to do. Get rid of unnecessary scenes. When you're doing a short story, you don't have a lot of time to tell a story. So if you're going to spend like pages describing what's inside this guy's car when he's driving to Fugetsudo or whatever, cut it. And then similarly, trim narratives that is too wordy. Do a pass for punctuation and spelling errors. Make sure you go through. Nobody likes to see a lot of punctuation and spelling errors, because then that's a sign of an amateur writer. And so you might want to have someone else read your work to make sure that, you know, there's no punctuation errors and things. And last of all, keep writing. Okay, sorry, wrap that up.
Iris,
Yes.
I think these are really important, and you know, why don't you spend a few more minutes on them? Because that's as a person that's one of the readers in the contest, these are really important points that that determine, you know, that can determine whether a story gets through or not. So can I just
Okay. I don't want to be a time hog here. I think the only one that I really want to kind of describe a little bit more is the first one, make your sentences active. So what I mean by that is, for instance, say this guy is driving up the 110 freeway, the one who wants the cake, and he's trying to get to Fugetsudo to get the cake, the delicious cake, before it closes. You might say something like, I was driving up the 110 freeway and I needed to get to Fugetsudo before it closed. That's not, that's more exposition, that's expository. So if you wanted to make that exciting, make it feel like you're in the action, like all I could see were the red taillights, you know, swimming up ahead and bumper to bumper traffic. And then tick the minute hand hits the 50-minute mark, and I know that I only have 10 minutes before Fugetsudo closes. So, you know, it's a little, you want to try to be in the middle of it instead of just telling. You want to live, you want to live the moment and use active verbs and be active in the scene. Try to visualize it instead of just telling it. I think the other things are a little, they're explanatory here. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Iris. And now we'll turn to Gary Phillips.
Well, you know, I just want to underline, of course, all these really salient points that Iris has talked about. And I'll talk a little bit about having, as Miya mentioned, I've edited various anthologies and I've written quite a few, or published quite a few short stories. And I really want to emphasize a couple of things that she said, and I'll talk about a couple of other ideas or a couple of other notions that came to me or have come to me over time. One is, for sure, think about, where does the story start? And particularly as you're telling a short story, you've got to get right to it. You don't have a lot of time for buildup. You don't have a lot of time to set the scene, even understanding that we're talking about a very specific setting. In this case, it's Little Tokyo. But the more you can bring us right into the story, right immediately, the better you're going to hook the reader, the better you're going to make that narrative, I think, sort of naturally kind of organically build from the character. The person who wants that cake, or the woman who wants to resolve things, with her dead mother. Whatever the backstory is, that you should be aware of it, and you can reveal bits and pieces of it as we go along. But the more you bring us into the story, the more then we're going to go along with you and find out. As the character, sometimes as the character finds out things, we find out things, or sometimes things are revealed, and that helps to make the story rich and more grounded. And I wanted to say too that I've edited anthologies and I've written stories set in different locales. Some locales that I've been to, or some locales I've not been to. And obviously, the more you can ground your story in a sense of place, and not like a travel log, and not just stuff that you read on Wikipedia or what have you, but the more you can give it a kind of specificity is great. As an example, I don't know a lot about the history of Little Tokyo, but I used to go to a jazz club, which unfortunately is not there any longer. It was called the Blue Whale, and it was a great place, man. It was like on the second, floor of the plaza, and you go down there and you just heard some great music. I say that to say, so even as an outsider, if I were going to do a story in a setting that I'm not familiar with, I know I could do a story that could start there, or could wind up there, or revolve around that, because I have some sense of what that place was like, having been there and experienced it. But even if you haven't had a chance to be in a specific place and experience it, the idea is that the more you can find out, whether it's from residents themselves, go to that place and observe. Can't observe the Blue Whale. The Blue Whale is not there any longer. But go to the locale and even just talk to some old timers, or just hang out. Honestly, the richer that becomes in terms of you telling the story. So that you should be intimidated by not being familiar with, that's really my point. You shouldn't be intimidated by not being familiar with the place. It's because it's always about the characters, right? It's always about the human condition. And the more you're in the skin of your character, and usually in a short story, it's pretty much just one or maybe two main characters. You don't have a lot of time. You don't have a lot of real estate for subplots. You don't have a lot of real estate to bring on a bunch of characters on stage. You really don't. And is that right, Mia? I mean, I believe the cap is it 2,500 words?
Yes.
Yeah. So you've got to get to it. You've got to bring us in. You've got to bring us on that journey, as Iris said, and you've got to then bring us to a resolution. Now, I'll say this: some of you might be thinking about writing a mystery, or a kind of something that gets revealed, at the resolution of the story. That's great. But again, you have to know where you're going. For me, now I plot. One of the things we're probably not going to talk a lot about today, but even for short stories, I will write down some notes about where I think the beginning and the middle and the end is, as Iris was just talking about, and some sense of that arc, the emotional arc, the character arc. You want to take that particular character, or maybe it might be two or three, but honestly, we can't really be more than that. It's probably going to be one. And where do you want to start them, and where do you want to end them? And if it's a mystery, I'll say this much. It's good to read some other mysteries, particularly short story mysteries, to get some sense of the feel and the flow, because it's always about the pace of the story as well. But sometimes in a story, and this could be a little harder to pull off, but I'll talk about it anyway. You start one way and you sort of present things in one fashion. And at the end of the story, in what they call the reveal or the twist, it calls into question the all what you've read before, and you see it in a different way. You see it in a different light. So there are ways to sort of do that in your story, to present things as if they are, we understand them to be X, but in fact they are Y. That might be a little bit more intimidating, but it is a way to think about constructing the story so that even if it is something as seemingly as simple as this person wanting to get that piece of cake, there may be some deeper psychological reason for this. There may be some other reveal that even if they were to get that cake and, you know, bite into it and man, that is the best cake they've ever had, it says something about why they wanted that cake. One of the things that Iris mentioned that, and I want to really emphasize, is it is always about what do characters want? What does your character want? And if there is going to be a conflict, and that doesn't mean that it's a physical conflict, it's often just psychological. It's often the tension you can create between a character A wants one thing and character B wants something else. Now, it could just be they both want the cake, but they might want that piece of cake for different reasons. And the more you can think about what it is that can create this kind of opposition and not necessarily be overt about it. Because one of the other great things about writing prose, writing anything actually, is in the dialogue. How people talk, what they say, what they don't say. Often, I think all of us are, I'm certainly a person like this, but I assume a lot of other people are too. You know, you meet somebody or you enter into some kind of interaction with a person, and we're often gauging the other person. We're thinking about what they're saying. We're thinking about what we're saying. And things are sometimes on a surface level, and then some things get to be on a little deeper level. Some things get to be a little deeper after that. So you can have a great, you can have a great scene. Listen, 2,500 words it really can go by pretty quick. You can really have just a great scene between two people, in the plaza talking, and you think at first it's just, it's a sunny day and somebody's sitting there on the bench or whatever it is, but things can get revealed. That onion can get pulled back. The layers can be revealed so that you start to then understand where one person and something about their backstory and what has brought them to this spot at this particular time, and the other person, and it goes for them as well. So really, I just want to say the more you can be inside your character's head, the more you can, and whoever that character is, male, female, whatever they are, the more I think you can then make them live on the page. And I'll say too that, I'll really want to emphasize this. I don't know about other writers, but it's a good thing the good Lord invented rewriting, because I get it down on the page, man, and then you come back to it a day or so later, you let it kind of sit there and simmer, and percolate, and sometimes you're kind of astonished at what you've written, but that's okay, because the art of writing is to get it all down, to have some kind of flow, to hopefully have that structure of the beginning, middle, and end, and then really go in and start to sharpen it and hone it, and really kind of, as you can, man, just sort of dig into it and let that creation flow. Let that become a fount of words, but the words have meaning. That everything, as Iris said, you can't, you don't have to waste time with hello, goodbye, unless there's a reason for that. Unless there's a real reason to show a character is a kind of obsequious kind of character, fine, and that's their character. But really, for your main characters, you want to get to the meat of what it is they want, and what is the obstacle standing in the way of it. It can be an external factor. It could be an internal. It could be a psychological factor, and of course, the best if it can be both. But the idea is that the more you can think about what that character wants and what they're willing to do to get it, which sometimes can be extreme. So I'm not suggesting you should go crazy, but sometimes it can be, and sometimes it can just be these little moderations, these little ramping up of whatever is standing in the way of getting what they want. And it could, and again, it's not necessarily a selfish impulse. I'm just suggesting that, listen, they may just want to sit on a park bench and enjoy the sun. That's fine. But that in and of itself, there can be obstacles to doing that. And the more you can honestly create those things for your character, or the want and desire for them to reach what they want and desire, I think the better off you are.
Thank you, Gary. I really want to thank Iris and Gary. This has been very, very helpful. And I'd like to take questions from the audience. I just want to make a comment, though, that in 2,500 words, I know for novelists, that sounds really short, but we've had stories dealing with time travel, artificial intelligence, really heartbreak, or you know, how history has impacted people's lives.
Right.
It's, you know, it's just amazing what people can get in those 2,500 words if they follow some of the things that you're talking about. And I know people must have questions, but as a moderator, I'm going to throw two questions out. One's kind of hard. Just maybe your opinion. What makes a story compelling? And the second is kind of, well, Norman Mailer said, writer's block is only a failure of ego. What did he mean by that? But the satirist Terry Pratchett said, there's no such thing as writer's block. That was just invented by people in California who can't write. So any comments on that, but especially the compelling one. And then we're going to look for Q&As from you all in the audience.
Iris?
Good. I think what makes a story compelling, that's very difficult, because I think it's a combination of all the things that I went through. But I think it's being able to empathize or feel like you're in the story is what would be compelling to me. Like if you can, I mean, it's as, again, as I was mentioning, making your sentences active and in the moment, then you feel like you're there. Then for me, that's what makes a story compelling. Gary?
No, I absolutely agree, and again want to I guess reiterate that the more you have a sense of who your character or characters are that you're putting on the page, I think then the more then you can help to convey to us who they are, and even some sense of what has brought them at this particular moment. Whenever our story starts, something has brought them there, right? Something has put them on stage at this moment. And if, as long as you know it as the writer, again, you don't have to worry about all this expository stuff about, you know, why they're there and blah, blah, blah. The more that you understand that they have a certain kind of drive, even if they're just wandering around, even if they're just wandering around and it's, you know, two strangers who encounter each other, there is still something about these two strangers that have brought them at this moment to where you're going to tell this story about them, whatever it is, you know, they're going to do. You know, the great example, of course, is it was a book by Patricia Highsmith, and it became the movie Strangers on a Train, and the two meet on the train and things are revealed, and we start to understand both have a kind of if only imagine burden that they are going to now enter this interesting and strange pact. And so the idea, and it doesn't have to be, you know, that extreme, but the idea again that if these people are whole people, that's how you have to think about them. They have lives. They have lives before we brought them on the page, and presumably they'll have lives once they've left the page. So if you have that as an understanding, and by the way, if you've taken the time to, and you know, screenwriters do this and prose writers do this, you write a little biographical sketch of your character, which none of that may get ever revealed. But the idea that you have an understanding of who the character is, the more then you can put them in motion, and I think the more then they'll be interesting for us to read about them.
Going off of that, I can say that what turns me off immediately is if I don't root for the character. Like if I don't care what happens to this protagonist, then I shut it off. You know, I turn off the television or stop reading if I'm like, I don't care what happens to this person.
Mhm.
So that doesn't necessarily mean your character can't be a bad character or a gray character, or, somebody who maybe is a criminal. But as long as you understand why, like if you understand the motivation of why this guy is acting like that, or this woman is, mean to people, as long as you understand why, then I'm on board. But if I don't understand why, I don't know what this person wants, or I don't, or I just don't want to root for this person, that's an immediate turn off for me.
Yeah. Well, what if you're writing and like Gary said, you put it aside and then you come back to it and you're thinking, oh man, what was I doing? And you have to change, you need to change the direction, but you're blocked. It's that writer's block thing. Is it just because, does it happen to me because I'm from California and I don't know how to write? Or, how do you conquer that?
I'll just say for myself, yes, there are certain times, of course, when you might, as they say, write yourself into a corner, or you sort of reread what you've written, and some of it, not all of it, it's you're going to throw out, but some of it, as you said, you might want to change direction, you might want to shift things up, and if it isn't clear to you at that moment, that's okay. My philosophy is do not stress about that. My thing is to go do something else. Go fix something around the house, go do some yard work, go to the gym, take a walk, whatever it is. I really firmly believe this. Now, unfortunately, it never comes to me in dreams, but it actually does come to me when I'm doing something else. But I know, of course, that somewhere in my mind, I'm working on the problem. Somewhere in my mind, I'm thinking about, well, wow, that character wouldn't say that. What would they say in this situation? And then I think because I'm not so focused on it, it seems to then bubble up. It seems to then kind of worm its way up from somewhere in the subconscious about that. So for me, I find that if I'm thinking about it, if I'm just staring at the page or the computer screen, I guess these days, although I edit by physical copy, I can't edit on the paper, on the machine. But I go away and I do something else. To me, I've always then been able to come back to it kind of with a fresh take and a fresh perspective.
Yeah, I think there's two things for me. Well, one is Gary had mentioned earlier that he's a plotter. Same here. I think that helps. A lot of people who have writer's block is because, as Gary said, you write yourself into a corner. But I think if you outline before you start writing, that really helps because it gives you a map sort of where to go. And I always start with I call it a vomit draft. And that's either, both in screenwriting and writing novels. I just go, I have an outline, but I don't try to edit myself in the beginning. I just write whatever, comes out, and the outline might change and things will change wherever the characters take me. But I still have, I kind of have a roadmap, and then I just go all the way to the end, and I don't try to check myself. And if I get stuck, then I skip it and I just go to the next thing on my outline. So that helps. And then also but then there's the editing phase where, you're actually trying to make it sound good. And then if I get stuck in those cases, I do, as Gary said, I'll usually walk with my husband, and then I'll just tell him all my, where I'm stuck at, and he won't have a clue as to what the hell I'm talking about. But just by talking it out, I usually get an answer like you're walking, so the blood is circulating, or I don't know what it is, but I get my own answer. But he always takes credit for giving the answer. It's like, yeah, that was my idea. No, I thought of it, but it was good talking to you,
Joy, are there any questions from our participants, our listeners?
Yeah, we have a couple. So we have one from Clyde. Thank you. Asking either of you, what's the number one most common mistake that most beginning short stories writers do in their writing?
Well, I don't know I really don't know what the common mistake is, but Iris said it, which is to say, put it down on paper, man. Just forget it. Just write it. Just write the thing out. Just whatever it is, whatever the story is, whatever the story is you want to tell, just write it. And it is really in the editing process, because you really do have to be your harshest critic. I mean, that is the one thing I've certainly learned over a period of time, having plenty of other harsh critics tell me this. So that yes, the more you can just put it down and try to be, I guess that's really the lesson, is to try to be as objective as you can when you come back to it, but do not worry about trying to get it just right the first time.
I probably, because I haven't read a lot of beginning short stories, but I would imagine it's that they wouldn't have the beginning and the middle and the end, because there are some things that I've read where it's a great beginning and then it didn't end, or it just fizzled out, or it didn't have a journey in it. Like, I think, so I think for me it probably is, you should have a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Thank you. Yeah. So we have another one, which is from Julie Fukunaga. And they ask, in our shoes, how would you approach incorporating a hyper-specific setting and incorporating research into your stories?
Well, I recently, my last novel was set in Los Angeles in 1963. And I did a fair amount of research. And then, of course, the great lesson of all that is to never do an information dump. So you have to distill the information you've read. And even if it is about a very specific place, or a specific place within a specific locale, you really have to avoid too much history lesson, too much exposition. You have to find a way obviously some of this can come through narrative, but it should be as bare as you can make it. The more you can make this come out through dialogue, for me, the better.
That's really good pointer there, I think. Yeah, because I don't like to read history lessons. Yeah, it's just, just information dumps, as Gary said. Yeah, nobody wants to read that. So as he said, if you put it more naturally, like in dialogue or something, but it is good to do the research. So that's a good starting point, so that you can have specificity in your descriptions.
This is probably a somewhat more extreme example, but for instance, you might actually read, a whole book about a time period or a place, and in the end, you might glean from it, I don't know, 4 or 5 sentences. But those could be the pearls. Those can be the specifics that project the picture that you want to project to your reader, to make that imagery come alive for them. It really is it's a real distillation process.
Joy, are there any more questions?
There are not, but if anyone has any that they would like to just unmute for, I think we have time for about one more, or you can put it in the chat as well.
And while we're waiting, I'm going to just pose one more. Do you have a regimen, a writing regimen? Do you think that's necessary? And what is there a time of day that you feel your creative juices are the juiciest?
Go ahead, Gary.
Okay. Well, I'm an old man now. I used to be able to write into the wee hours in the morning. In fact, I had to write into the wee hours in the morning, because as Miya knows, when Miya and I first met many, many moons ago, I was a community organizer, and then I worked for actually still around, Liberty Hill Foundation, which funds community organizing, and I was the outreach director. So I'd be out in Nickerson Gardens, I'd be out in Little Tokyo, I'd be out in Boyle Heights until, I don't know, 10 o'clock at night, whatever it was, and get home and maybe, well, the kids were in bed by then, but read a story to them if it was a little earlier, and then write until I don't know, 1, 2 in the morning, and get up and in fact, I finished the first novel, Violent Spring, like that, which is set in the aftermath of 92. But now the regime is I get up in the morning and have my coffee, and I write. Like right now, I'm working another book. So my goal is to hit my quota, which is 1,200 words a day. Sometimes, man, them words just like, it's like magic, man. It's like, oh, it's great. It's just, you know, it's just pouring out of me, man. Oh, no wonder I'm a writer. This is fantastic. And then other days, it's like the Flintstones. Every word, I'm carving it in stone, man. Every word is just like, it's just like painful to get from one sentence to the next. So the main thing is, I guess, consistency, right? You just got to hit it.
That's so funny. Yeah, I think also when I was younger, I had a lot more discipline and I had a lot more energy. And so I was working full time, and then I come home and then I just write, and, you know, I could do it, but I didn't have a social life though. I was just writing. I was going to class. I was going to work, and then at night I'd go to class, and then after class I'd be writing, you know, so I had a lot more energy back then. And now that I'm older, I don't have that kind of energy anymore. So yeah, I also, like Gary, I have more of like a quota, I guess. Because every day is also different, because I have, you know, there's meetings and things, and I'm still juggling writing novels in Hollywood. COVID was great for me because I didn't have to go to any of these meetings, you know, where they send you across town to Santa Monica, and then you like wait an hour in the lobby for some exec to meet with you. And then it's like, hi, bye. And then you drive back. So thank goodness I don't do those anymore. Everything is now by Zoom, which is fantastic. But I have like a reminders list, and then it tells me like I need to work on chapter blah, 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 and finish it by the end of the week. So it's a little more flexible. So I can, like, one day, if it's all day meetings, then I can, you know, spend all the next day working on it. And you know, I do work every day, like weekends, holidays, whatever. And it's just, to me, it's like, did I check that off yet on my list of things to do? And that's how I guess that's how I write.
Okay, we have one last question from Jonathan, and I want to ask our listeners, is it okay if we go a few minutes over? Because this has been very helpful. Okay, I get the thumbs up from Clyde. So Joy, you have the last question.
Yeah, so it's from Jonathan Van Harmelen. And he's asking, can you have a story about Little Tokyo that doesn't take place in Little Tokyo? Yeah, so I'll pass it over to you all.
Well, I guess Mia and Bill better answer that one. That's kind of philosophically deep. I don't know, man. I don't know.
You know, I think when we talk about Imagine Little Tokyo, we're talking about a story that will, you know, acknowledge and highlight the specialness of Little Tokyo and the, you know, the cultural essence. So that's really a hard question, because we've had things that maybe weren't set in Little Tokyo, but the two characters, you know, had a strong relationship, or what's driving the story is based on what happened what about Little Tokyo impacted their lives.
Right.
Do you agree with that, Bill?
Yeah, I think, you know, that's a good point. And I also mentioned in the chat in response to Jonathan's question that we've had stories where people had memories of their childhood in Little Tokyo, or stories where people imagine Little Tokyo 100 years from now,
Right.
things like that. So there is a connection. And if you could try to make the connection, maybe not to the place, but to the spirit of what a community means, I think that's still a good connection.
And there's also, been interesting kind of anime type, almost, characters that, but whether they're in animal form or what kind of form, it's a whole other take on Little Tokyo. It just be real creative, but don't be crazy, because some of the people are conservative. I like the crazy stuff though. Oh, okay. Well, I think this has been great. Thank you so much, Iris and Gary. This has been really, really helpful. Let's give them a hand. And lastly, I would like to also thank Bill Watanabe, Joy Yamaguchi from JANM, Elizabeth Morikawa, Yoko Nishimura, Discover Nikkei, and in particular, Naomi Hirahara, because this writer's workshop was her brainchild, and she really would have wanted to be here. She unfortunately had a death in the family. Otherwise, she would be here with us. But we're all thinking about you, Naomi.
Absolutely.
Just a reminder, the $1,000 cash prize is great. It's a one-time only prize because this is our 10th anniversary. Next year it'll go back down to 500 unless we get a big grant or something. And we, just to let you know, we are funded only through donations. We're all volunteer, and so we humbly welcome any kind of assistance that you can provide. And you can reach us through our Little Tokyo Historical Society website. And I just, I forgot to ask Gary and Iris if you have any last words before we sign off with everyone. Gary?
Oh, well, no, other than, listen, don't be discouraged if what you write is not the thing in your head that you imagine it would be. Don't fret. Don't turn away. Think about it, deconstruct it, and go back at it again. Really, because writing is rewriting and and rewriting some more.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks first of all for having me. And I would just say, keep writing. You can't expect to be an instant success, because people always tell me, oh, so you just, you just became successful like that. I'm like, no, I worked at it for many years. I went to classes, I wrote a lot. It's not like I instantly decided, okay, today I'm going to be a writer and I'm going to write the best novel. You just have to work at your craft, and you just have to keep going and just keep writing every day.
And Iris, lastly, would you please show your book on the screen? I can see.
Yeah, let's both show our books.
And then we'll go to Gary, or both of you.
So
Oh yeah.
here it is.
There you go.
Be under one roof.
And Gary, your book?
One shot Harry.
One shot, Harry.
One shot Harry. Okay. Thank you so much for helping us out and giving of your precious time for this, and we will all go out and get your book, and I hope everybody submits a story. And
that's the main thing. Submit a story.
Yes. Story. Right. Thank you so much, and good night. And I'd like to ask the participants to stay on.